Welcome back to the Pulsing Podcast. This is episode 6, Inside the Writer's Mind. I'm here with writer Katie Carolise. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, I'm going to be asking you a list of questions in relation to your job as a writer and just getting an insight on your mindset when it comes to writing. I may even ask you a question in relation to if you were, I would say, a script writer for like a movie, a game, like what would be your goal, what would be your objective, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so first question I have for you that is in this document that I have here. Inspired you to start writing?
Oh man, that's that's a tough one right off the bat because I have been writing my entire life. I mean, from the time I always tell the story. My grandma was watching me and I was being really fussy. I was only like 3 years old, but she didn't know what I wanted and why I was being such a pain in the ass. So she reached inside her pocketbook and she handed me a pen, and I was so happy, and I instantly like stopped, doing whatever I was doing to bother her. And that was that. I mean, I had a pen in my hands and I never put one down since then. When I was about 11 years old, that's when I really was like, I want to make this my career. And I know that like that's weird for an 11-year-old to be thinking about, but that was what my mindset was. I mean, all throughout my childhood before that point, I was, other kids were playing with Barbies or skipping rope, and I was sitting inside hand sewing the binding on the books that I wrote and illustrated with my novel making kit that I got for my birthday. So I had a very different outlook on what I wanted to do with my life, and it's been that way for as long as I can remember. So, when people ask me what inspired you to start writing, I mean, it really is just I'm alive, and that's all I can do.
That's a very good answer. So, next question is relation to how would you overcome writer's block?
Oh man, that's a good one. So sometimes this will happen to me, and this actually happened to me very recently. I was working on a book, um, and it was really difficult because it was from a perspective that I had never attempted before. So it's a male point of view, and he's a serial killer. So very dark stuff, very dark mindset, and it was really, really challenging for me to want to continue writing from that point of view and to want to go to the desk every day and do it, but I knew that I had to. So when I had these moments of severe blocks, I would just open up a separate document from the one that I was working on and ask myself questions and answer them in the most basic form without trying to be literary about it. So it helped me to reconnect to the purpose of what I was writing instead
Mhm.
of just sitting there trying to, be flowery about it or try so hard to draw out this literary genius. Like, no, I can't right now. I'm not in that mindset. So I need to reconnect to why it is I'm even writing this in the first place. I find that helps a lot.
Well, that's very good. So, my next question is relating to your writing process. Would you be able to give us a little bit of an insight on how that works?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you asked this question now because I'm in the middle of another work in progress. And um, at this point, I've written 4 books to completion in the past year. Um, and this will be my 5th book. And I feel like I've nailed down the process. So this is how it goes for me. Might not work for everybody else, but this is how it works for me. I'll get an idea, and it'll usually come to me in the form of like the climactic point in the story. So then I like work backward from that point to see, okay, how do we get there? Um, So then once I'm trying to figure that out, I'll usually talk a lot with my husband about it. He's not a writer. We joke that he's illiterate because he just he doesn't read or write or do anything like that at all. But he's very creative, he's very intelligent, and I rely on him a lot to identify plot holes, to help me work out kinks in the storyline and things of that nature. So it's very helpful to have a sounding board like that that I can bounce ideas off of and really hone in the story.
So
So
you just basically answered my question there for me. So you'd say that your husband kind of gives you ideas in a sense, even though that he's not a reader or writer himself.
oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, I would totally say that. He is probably the most helpful part of my process, honestly, because at the end of each day, as I'm writing a draft, I'll as soon as I close my laptop, I come out to the living room and I'm like, okay, I'm done. Do you want to hear what I wrote today? And he always says, yes, I want to hear it. So I read it out loud to him, and that helps me catch more mistakes as well. So reading out loud versus reading in your head, there's a big difference there that I think a lot of writers um, sort of overlook that, and they don't read things out loud. And I would say read it out loud, even if it's just yourself. It feels kind of funny. Um, you should totally read it out loud because you're gonna find things that way that you wouldn't the other way. So there's that. But once I'm done talking through the bare bones of the idea, then I'll start to build out character profiles for all of the characters that I have in my mind.
Hmm.
And then once I build out those profiles, then I'll start building out an outline from beginning to end. What happens in every single chapter, what happens in every single scene. And that way, when I go to start writing, I don't really, the likelihood that I'm going to experience writer's block at that point is very, very low. So
Okay.
I find that if I have a good structure to work with right off the bat, it minimizes the downtime that I spend pulling my hair out trying to figure out what I'm going to write next.
Yeah, that definitely sounds very, very challenging in that sense when it comes to writer's block. I mean, it can be a bit of a nightmare.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crippling. You start to, just the negative self-talk alone is enough for some people to say, you know what, I give up. And it's unfortunate, but you have to find a way to work through it, and you need to find, sometimes it can be scary because you have this moment and you're like, oh man, I know I should change the way I'm doing things, but I'm scared because I'm so used to doing things this way. And that was me for a very long time. I didn't write my first book until last year. And a big
Okay.
reason for that was because I never used to share anything, not even with my husband, until I felt that it was finished. And as a result, I never finished anything.
Right.
So I changed that. I said, okay, if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to actually write this book, I'm going to do the opposite of everything I've done before.
Hmm.
And I did that, and I finished a book in 100 days. And then I was like, oh, that was really fun. Let me do it again. And then the next book I finished in 45 days. And then the next book I also finished in 45 days. And then the next book I finished in 60 days. So I'm like, okay, I got this now. I am never going back to the way it was before.
Jesus, I mean, let me tell you that you creating that amount of books in that amount of time, it's just absolutely bananas. I'll tell you that
Yeah,
much.
it is, it is. And I have to be honest though, I don't live a normal life. And what I mean by that is I I almost like removed myself from society.
Hmm.
I work for myself at home.
Hmm.
So I don't have anyone to report to. I live very, very deep in the woods. We don't have a gas station. We don't have a police station. We don't have a fire department. We don't have a traffic light. Like there's nothing in this town except for maybe 1,000 people who I can't see from my location in the woods on my 11 acres. So I'm very far removed from what the average
Civilization.
person. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and I don't have kids, and not that I don't want them. I would love to have them, but I just can't. Um, and so we have a very unique situation.
Hmm.
Um, and I one of the biggest reasons I started to write the book that I wrote is because my dad died in 2019. It was very unexpected. He was my best friend ever, and I just adored that man. And I was sitting there and I was like, I'm living in the woods. I'm not doing anything creative at this point because it hurt because he was my biggest supporter and I was just like he's not here anymore, so why even bother? And then I just had this moment where I was like, you know what? Like I'm out here and I'm doing a disservice to his memory by not writing.
Doing what you love.
And yeah, exactly. And that was always the thing that he always told me, do what you love. And then his other thing that he said, and the money will follow. Still waiting on that point, but but I'm doing what I love and I couldn't be happier for it. So um yeah, I mean like I know a lot of other people they struggle with having like full-time jobs, having kids and all these responsibilities that are very significant.
Hmm.
And I respect that and I recognize that, but I will say this, we all make time for the things that we want to make time for. And if writing is a thing that you want to make time for, then you have to find a way to do that, or you're gonna watch your life just go by and realize I never wrote that book that's been inside me all these years, like just culminating and waiting for me to give myself permission to write the book.
Hmm. I would like to ask next, besides writer's block, what would be the most challenging aspect of being a writer in your own words, in your own opinion?
I think it's the isolation. It's a very writing is not a team activity. It can be, there are people who co-author things and even I'm dabbling in that a little bit right now. Thank you to the Twitter community for allowing me to have a writing community as a person who lives so far removed from everybody else. It's not easy to find like-minded people, but for the most part, it's a very isolating activity. So long, long stretches of time just spent by yourself. Um, and that can be challenging, not because I don't like myself. I love myself. I enjoy my company, but I really miss my husband sometimes. I love my dogs. And, there are just these things where I'm like, ah, I wish I could do this in a room with my husband there and we're just talking while I'm also writing. Like there are times where I'm like, I really just wish this could be a group activity, but it's not. So that's probably the most challenging part is the isolation.
Mm, yeah. My next question, do you have any specific writing rituals or habits?
Yes, yes, I do. I'm a very structured, deadline driven, to-do list oriented person. Like I have lists and lists of things that I need to do in like a very specific way that I write them down and check them off. Like it's bizarre. I'm not even gonna lie about it. I'm complete OCD, but this is more or less the way my days go every single day. I wake up at 6:30 a.m. I get right into my desk and I start writing my for my work because that's what I do for a living is I'm a copywriter. So I usually have about 8 to 10 articles that I need to write before I can even get to writing my books. once those are finished, which usually takes me to about 11 o'clock in the morning, that's when I will shift over to reading. And so I'll read for about an hour of just whatever book it is that I'm in the middle of.
Mhm.
And then um, once that hour is up, that sort of like helps me switch gears from like copywriter mode to creative writer mode. Then I'll journal, and I'll journal about what it is that I want to write about that day. So I'll talk about, things that I wrote the day before, and then what ha needs to happen next in the sequence. And then I'll do like a little bit of free writing before I actually get into writing the book. And then, of course, the last stage is writing the book.
So, this is in relation to character development. What is the character development structure like for you?
So, it used to be that I would build out these, I talked about before, I build out individual profiles for each character. And I used to do that like individually on my own, but over Christmas, my husband got me this amazing book, and it is a little like workbook that he got off Amazon that is for character development, and it has all these wonderful questions in it. Um, that really makes me think differently than I would have on my own doing it the way I did before. So like things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about, like, where they went to school and where they lived beforehand and like all these different things that I'm like, oh yeah, like that's a good point. I should have like these things nailed out. So that workbook really helps a lot. And I wish I had the thing in front of me so I could tell you what it's called, but I don't. It's in the other room. But yeah, I would say definitely check those out on Amazon. There are a ton of fun workbooks on Amazon for writers that I've I've looked into over the past year, and they're all pretty fun. So check
Well,
those out.
that's pretty amazing. I'm actually planning on getting one of your books soon. So definitely,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, definitely slide me a recommendation on which you think would be, I'd say, the most fun to read.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what genres do you enjoy writing the most?
Well, I am a thriller writer.
Mhm.
So pretty much that entire genre, which encompasses a lot of different types of thrillers. So you have your mystery thrillers, which is what I kind of dip my toes into the whole novel writing experience with. That was my debut series as a mystery thriller series. Psychological thrillers. Right now I'm writing a young adult paranormal thriller. So that's very exciting and I'm really into it. So yeah, pretty much anything that's like makes you go, "Ooh, what?" That's what I love to write and that's what I love to read. So
So, my next question is relating to a question I actually had for you before our interview began. Now, I know that you stated that you haven't seen the Avatar movies. So it's basically a paraplegic marine that goes off into a different planet known as Pandora, and there's these humanoid forms known as the Navi, and so basically he goes in at first to try to complete orders for his captain, for his general, in order to be able to gain the trust of the Navi, and just follow the orders in order to be able to gain a specific material that can give the humans bunch of bags full of cash, 20 million apparently. So I would like to know if you had the opportunity to write the script for Avatar 3. Um, it's like I said, it's set in space with humanoids known as Navi. What kind of what would you kind of put in the circle? What would you put in the brainstorm circle for Avatar 3 if you were one of the scriptwriters?
Oh man, that's a really tough question because I'm really unfamiliar with the franchise, so I
Mhm.
wouldn't even know like what to even suggest. And truthfully, um, screenwriting is one of those things that I just am terrified of. I would never attempt it. It is not my forte. I have zero idea what goes into any of that, and kudos to everyone who makes fabulous movies and television shows and everything. Like, I don't know how you do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, yeah, that was just that was kind of like off the books question, off the document question. So, what advice would you give to aspiring writers then that have
Aspiring
that
writers.
have big dreams in order to become successful authors?
Yeah, so here's the thing. People, it's funny to me because people will say to me online, oh, what's your secret? Like, you're doing so well and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, I spend a lot of money. Like, I spend a lot of money on my advertisements, on marketing and publicity and things of that nature because like I said, I am so secluded. I don't have friends and family. I don't have a network of people to rely on to help me with this. So I need to I need to spend a lot to stand out.
Okay.
Um, and I think that, especially for those who are planning on going the self-publishing route, there needs to be a moment where you say to yourself, it's not going to be instantaneous success. And you also need to change your definition of what success is to
Hmm.
you. Because for me, at first, I was like, oh, like, I want this to be my, like, I almost wanted it to be like a transition to a new career. And um, so I was like, oh, I'll be making like, enough money to potentially leave my job and do this full time because I am a delusional person. And that was my train of thought. So, obviously that is not the case at all. I sell a lot of books, more than 90% of self-published authors sell in their lifetime. But the reason for that is because I invest a lot in it. And so I changed my goals from monetarily driven to just exposure driven. And because I have changed that definition of what success means to me, I've been having a lot of better of a time with it. For those who are wanting to go the traditional route, I would say prepare yourself for a lot of rejection
Hmm.
because you will get it and it sucks. It's the worst. And, I have a sort of unique perspective on this because I was in training to become a literary agent and I was the one handing out those rejections. And I'll tell
Hmm.
you, it's not fun whether you're the one sending in a manuscript to be read, or you're the one rejecting said manuscript and breaking a writer's heart. The whole
Yeah.
process sucks for everybody. Um, so I would just keep that in mind and don't get discouraged because, I mean, you look at Stephen King and J.K. Rowling and all these wonderful writers that we all know and love, and if you dig into what they had to go through to get to where they are today, I mean, it's a long road. It wasn't overnight success for them either.
Yeah.
So just keep at it, don't get discouraged, and lean on your writing community because they're there to build you up. Not everybody. I mean, there are some who are kind of jerks and get a kick out of tearing other writers down. But for the most part, I would say, and especially the writing community on Twitter, they're good people that really just want to help you succeed. So don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it and listen to the feedback that you're getting with a grain of salt, I would say, because sometimes, you have to learn how to filter out the bad feedback from the good feedback that is actually there to help
Right.
you. So don't, just listen blindly to everything that everybody is telling you,
Hmm.
but realize that there are nuggets in there every now and then that you should say, oh, you know what? They're right. I should do this more. I should do this a little differently. So,
Yeah.
um, be receptive.
Hmm. My next question is relating to your favorite book that you've written. What is it?
Oh man. Okay. So my favorite book that I've written is Forget Me Not, which is the sequel to my first book, which is Reasonable. And that whole book series is a trilogy. I've finished the trilogy. The third installment is in editing right now, but yes, Forget Me Not, and that one is coming out in about a week on May 13th. Um, that is my favorite book so far, but the one that I'm working on right now, I've got to be honest, I think it's going to be my favorite out of all of them, and it's not to do anything with the What Happened to Amelia Davis series, so I'm very excited about that one.
Yeah, I did. I actually need some more books to read, so I definitely might pick up on that trilogy if I manage to get the chance.
Yeah,
So,
I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
oh, 100%. In fact, I might actually pre-order a book soon, and I'm definitely going to be leaving a review once I finish it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. The reviews help more than anything else. That really does.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, I would like to ask, do you prefer writing short stories, novels, or long stories? Which out of those three would you say is the best and your favorite?
Hmm. I love writing novels. I
Hmm.
do. And that's really what I've written the most of. Aside from poetry, I used to be a slam poet, and um, I had the opportunity. I just missed the cut to take my slam poetry to a national competition. Um, but I did that for a long time, and I really thought poetry is going to be the thing that makes me recognized as a writer. But it wasn't. Um, but yes, I do love to write novels. Every now and then I'll do a short story, but they're usually like nonfiction, very personal, almost like journal entries, so I don't share them very much.
Well, if I want to give a little bit of inspiration here from you, is that I'm actually I'm writing my own story.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
And what is your story about?
my story is My Heart Lies Elsewhere. It's a romantic story, based in England, from and the characters are William Bradford and Elise Salvador. And so they actually meet in a masquerade. They meet in like a masquerade ball, right? And it's
Hmm.
like so I'm trying to still think of how I can turn this into like a horror romance show, like sort of story, if you will, because
Yeah.
I love to mix things up a little bit. So in order to be able to put in a little bit of horror, how would you go about that, if you don't mind me asking?
Like to bring in the horror elements to your romance story, you mean?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh man, I would play a game of what if.
Hmm.
Um,
Like what
and
works
that
best?
Yeah, like what if instead of this happening to them, this super scary thing happened to them? Like what would their reaction be to that? Um, so I'm working on a book with another author right now, and that's a game that we love to play whenever we're on the phone together. Is like, okay, we're building out the plot for this, and our story is a horror, um, kind of locked room thriller kind of thing. And so we'll often ask, okay, so what if this happened? And then we'll go down that rabbit hole for a bit and see if anything of value comes out of it. And if it does, we'll write it down and remember it. And yeah, we'll just kind of go through that exercise until we've got enough good things going that we're like, okay, like we can totally use this in our greater plot.
Mhm. Now, I would also just like to say that we may have to do a second part because I just got the notification. I don't have Zoom Plus, so obviously that means we only have like at least 30 minutes. And now we only have 10 minutes left. So are you completely fine with doing a second part?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
All right, Grant. So I think I'll be able to squeeze in two more questions before we end this, and then obviously I'll set up another one and send you an invite.
Okay, great.
Okay, so what do you hope readers take away from your books?
Yeah, so my first series is very it's very character driven. There's a lot of heavy stuff in there. And I think for me the biggest thing that I want people to walk away from after reading that is the value of open, honest communication.
Okay.
Because a lot of the things that happen in that story could have been avoided if people spoke more honestly with one another and listened to each other when they were speaking instead of assuming things based on their own life experiences.
Okay.
Um, so that's what I would say. I really hope that at the end of the day, when people put down my books, they're not just like, oh, that was a thrilling mystery. I hope that they say, you know, I should probably have a different communication style, maybe like have an on more honest discussions with people because you never know who's hurting or
True.
why and what you can do to potentially help them before they go off the deep end.
So my last question before we finish up and move on to part two here is, do you listen to any music while you write, and if so, what kind?
Oh yeah, I always have to be listening to lo-fi hip hop when I'm writing. Otherwise, no writing gets done. Either that or it can be sometimes if it's very, very quiet, which it is here in the woods. You know, if my husband has to go to town, for example, um, then I leave my headphones out just in case, you know, anything happens and I need to be alert. So during those moments, I'm not listening to anything but just the complete quiet, and that can also be very, very good.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in to part one of episode six of the Pulsing podcast with astounding writer Katie Caroli. And we're going to be heading on over to part two in just a few moments. And if you can take the time to possibly give Katie some reviews on her upcoming books, especially her trilogy that she mentioned in part one of this interview, I would be very grateful. And if you could also share both her and my profiles around in order to be able to get this interview into the writing community space and of course on my channel, that would be absolutely fantastic. So Katie, I will see you in just a few moments, and thank you gents, thank you ladies and gents for tuning in.
Awesome. Thank you.